Section 4 asks you to make dummy variables and to work with dummy variables, and that can be confusing a little bit. First in how you make them, and then also in how you use them. So I want to talk about that for a couple of minutes. As you can see, this is the section that I'm talking about. It's on page 14 for me, but it might be slightly different for you because I'm working on this as I go along. So the first question here is, why can't we simply include the variable country new in the multiple regression analysis that we're doing here? So I hope you had a chance to think about this, but if you haven't, think about it now. Maybe pause the video, because it's easier if you figure it out yourself. But I'm giving you a moment to pause now and to unpause. If we were to include country new, so I'll explain now why we use dummies. If we were to include country new, we would be basically working with this as though it is not a nominal variable, which it is, but as though it is a scale variable, because that's the assumption in regression analysis and also in correlation. In other words, if we put it, what we're using as just a second. Yes, party LR. Sorry, I forgot which dependent variable we're working with. So let me make a little chart, maybe to illustrate what I mean. So I'm going to reset this and make a scatter plot, and hopefully that clarifies things. So let me use country new. Let's pretend that that's scale and put it on the x-axis. And then we say party LR. We can type here as well, by the way. And we're going to say this is scale 2. Okay, so we can do this. It'll make a little scatter plot for us. We could even ask it to make a little thing. It doesn't look very pretty, but we could work with this somehow. We could open up the chart editor even and say, okay, it opens up on a different screen for me. We could even say elements and then fit liner total and make a little line for us. It'll even give us a regression equation, right? So y equals a plus b times x. I hope you recall. So 3.44 would be the intercept of this, and then the b coefficient would be 0.09. None of this is meaningful because if we think about what these numbers represent, it's countries, right? So this is Germany, unified, then 2 was the Netherlands, 3 was Poland, 4 was Russia, and then the United States. So as we become more United Statesy, we become more right-wing. Is that what we're saying here? As we are more Germany, we are more left-wing. Is that the goal here? Of course not. So instead what we will do is pretend as though these countries are each in and of themselves, so separately, are their own scale variables. So instead of saying there's different categories in one variable, we'll say there's 5 variables, and each variable in essence measures to what extent is someone German, so the Germanness of someone. The only catch is that there's only 2 valid answers here, so there's only either 0% German or 100% German. This is one way to think in terms of for variables that we use in this way, so dummy variables. So dummy variables are nothing more and nothing less than just variables with 0, 1 values that measure the extent to which someone is something. Yeah, so a category, a nominal category. Okay, so let me show you how you make them, and then we can work with them a bit. In the instructions, there's 2 ways that are shown, and this is just for your information. You don't have to follow them. There's big red letters saying this. So here, this gray box tells you how, it's a little manual to create dummies by hand. So creating dummies by hand is through the menus. That's what I mean here. Basically what that means is you say in here, so this is still the country new variable is what we're working from. So we say transform, recode into different variables. That's basically what we've used before in the syntax as well. We'll use the bottom one, which is the country's new, right? So country new. From this one into, let's say the first one is called Germany. Yes, okay, and then we have to click change, and then we say all the new values, which opens up another thing. And then we say if it's value 1, which is the code for Germany, remember, then we'll call, we'll give people old value, new value, value 1, add. All other values, so if it's 2, then it's not Germans, then it's Dutch. If it's 3, then it's not Germans, it's Polish. All of these other ones, they get value 0, because we don't care what they are, but they are not Germans. We say add. So it says else is zero, and then we say continue. Okay, then we have to click OK in order to make this dummy variable, and it'll make it. So it makes the syntax for you actually. And then you see Germany is the bottom one here. Let me delete this and show you an easier way. And actually the easier way is already shown in the instructions because there's syntax at the bottom. So it says that in red letters. Instead of doing the steps above, copy and paste the syntax. So you see that for each country, and now it's just 5, but it might have been 20 countries or categories of something else, then this is a whole lot of work because you have to go through this thing for every step. Here we can just say copy this whole thing. And I'll show you what that looks like in the syntax. So here's the syntax from before. Let me just remove this just because it's a little easy to see. I'm just copy pasting now, right, from the instructions here. Okay, so what this syntax does is, again, the same recode command that we've looked at before. And it says recode from country new, country underscore new, which is this one. And then say value 1, which is Germans. Make those ones also on the variable that we'll call Germany. Again, we could have called this something else, like maybe the most famous, like Frankfurter Wurst or whatever. Something that signifies Germany, but we'll just call it simply Germany. And anything else, so if they're German, then they get 1, but if they're Dutch, Polish, Russian, or American, then they get a 0. Into a new variable that we'll call Germany, and a dot at the end. Once you've constructed this first command, you just could, if you were making this on your own, you could just copy paste it a bunch of times, and then change what it says. That's exactly what I've done here, right? So what I've done here then is write the next, copy paste, and then change it for the next category, which is Dutch, Netherlands, and that was variable value 2 on countries, right? So what I mean is this: value 1 Germany, value 2 Netherlands, value 3 Poland. So again, value 2 will become 1, but on a different variable, on the variable Netherlands. Yeah. Anything else, also if they're 1 in the original variable, they will become 0 into Netherlands, and then the same for Poland, and the same for Russia, and the same for United States. So if we run this bit, it repeats it, no errors, so that's good. And then you see in our variable view, there's this new set of variables: Germany, Netherlands, Poland, Russia, United States. To double check, let's make some frequency tables here. So country new, and then also our new dummy variables. And just to check whether that worked out okay, we will press OK here, and we'll get all these frequency tables. Just to double check, let's see, right? So the Netherlands here has 1,823 people, and we see that there's 1,823 people who have value 1, which is yes, they are Dutch. And then 6,163 people who have 0, which should be the sum of United States, Russia, Poland, Germany. So as you notice, this only works for mutually exclusive categories. So we can't do this dummy variable thing in the same way, at least if we have a variable that's set up that people could be multinationalities, for example, in this particular instance. So if we have dual citizenship for people who are Polish and Russian, for example, that won't work as easily with this. We'd have to make a new category of dummy variables, which is binational, for example, or if you have a specific group in mind, we could use that. I'm saying this to ask you to keep this in mind when you design your own research, design your own questionnaires. This is something that I see a lot of students doing because you want to be inclusive, you want to account for all the categories, but then dealing with this data becomes very hard as well. So think this through when you're designing stuff. Okay, but I know that this worked out, but you can double check on your own if you wanted to. Now, let's see how we can use this into a regression analysis. So that's what we're doing in the instructions over here. So the way we set this up is by saying analyze regression linear. And then we can say the dependent variable is party affiliation. So again, I'm going to say the variable names here and then type party LR, right? So left wing, right wing, that's what we're working with. By the way, the results that we'll get are different from yours because I haven't changed the steps in between. I'm just recording this video here. And I'm also not going to add all the things that you're supposed to add. I'm just going to show you the dummy variables and nothing else. I don't want to give everything away yet. So I've set this up, just the dummy variables. So what we're doing is we're asking, is there a significant impact of someone being from one of these 5 countries on the left-right wingness of them? So I'll click OK. And this is what we get in this case. Again, these are different numbers from you'll get because you should have set it up already in the steps in between. I didn't do that here for the purposes of instruction. And I also want you to do this on your own. Okay, so what we can see here, if this would be real results, then it's also statistically significant, even at a very small, like a 0.1% alpha level, right? So these are not actually zero, as you know, but just to make sure these are very small numbers, right? There's a scientific notation, okay? How we would read this is say, let's take Germany first, right? So it's significant, that's step one. Step two is which direction is it? It is positive. Here, Poland is negative, Germany is positive. It's positive. The third step might be, how big is this impact, okay? So that's the three steps that I always take when I look at significant values in regression analysis like this. Is first, is it statistically significant? Sig, in other words, your p-value. The second step is which direction does it have? Negative, positive. So is it going up or is it going down? And the third step is, if you're interested at all in this case, how big is the effect, right? What is the impact? And for that, we could also start looking at the beta coefficients, but that's a story for another time. So in the case of Germany, we might say it's a positive number. So if that would be the true result, then we would say if the more German someone is, the higher they score on this party LR scale. But you have to think about this very precisely. So party LR, if I'm not mistaken, is coded in the opposite direction. Let me find if that's true, because I might be wrong, but I think I'm not. Well, opposite, it's the higher the number, the more far right someone is. So that would suggest that the lower the number, here's my output, if it goes down, the more they are German, then they would be more left-wing. If it goes up, the more they are German, then they would be more right-wing. So this would suggest Germans are significantly more, because it's a positive number, right-wing, because that's how party LR is coded. Then, because that's the significant part here, right? That's the relevant part. It's always compared to something else. Then who exactly here? Okay, so what you see here is there's 4 countries here, and we had 5 countries. Which one is missing? It's the Netherlands here. SPSS recognized that these are 5 mutually exclusive variables, and so it kicked out one of them. There needs to be one so-called reference category. If you want to have agency over which one that is exactly, so suppose you wanted to compare all of these categories not to Dutch people, but to Germans, for example, then we might say analyze regression linear. It's simply the one that you take out then. So let's say take out the Germans. We see that it doesn't take out another category itself. So now it's the Dutch compared to the Germans. So you see that this is the same number, but just negative, right? Negative 0.595, same number as 0.9595, but positive. So the Germans are as different from the Dutch as the Dutch is from the Germans. That's kind of makes sense once you think about it. Okay, so that suggests the Dutch are more left-wing than the Germans. The Polish are even more left-wing than the Germans. The Russians are more right-wing than the Germans, and the Americans are more left-wing than the Germans. You might have some doubts with these results. I do too. I don't think this is necessarily true. And I hope that by going through the exercises, you'll discover some closer effect. When interpreting that, I know that you might still disagree with this. Of course, this is not necessarily the truth, capital T, but this is empirical data based on large numbers of people. Think of explanations for this. So one explanation that might be interesting to consider is that there might be a qualitative dimension to this as well. So this is people reporting on themselves, whether they are left-wing or right-wing. And so what it means to be right-wing or left-wing might be very, very different in each country, right? So Russia and Poland, for example, of course, have a history with a different type of far left than we're used to in Western Europe or in the United States, even more so. So if you're left-wing in the United States, for example, you're a Democrat, but a Democrat in the United States, if you ask political scientists, would sort of be a centrist in much of Europe. So these meanings might vary. Think about these things. It might be interesting to you. But this is as far as I wanted to go with this dummy discussion. And the next section that you can do is going to be the factor analysis. And I recommend that you try this as well. Thanks.